to the Quiet Warrior Show, where we help top leaders find their pathway to incredible success and a lifetime of happiness. Here is your host, Tom Dutta, the Quiet Warrior.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Quiet Warrior Show. This is Tom Dutta like butter, and it's great to have you here. We're live streaming today. We are on LinkedIn, Facebook, YouTube, and X, formerly Twitter, and now Rumble. What that means is that you're peeking in the studio as we interview today. We have JD Barker here, and I'm very excited about this gentleman. He's in the green room. Just want to set this up for a moment, and want to put something on screen here for just 30 seconds. Take a look at this image, and we'll be right back. Okay, that's what happens when you're live streaming, everyone. The host forgot to turn on the RGB lights in the studio. We'll edit and clean all that up. Let me tell you a little bit about JD Barker. That's Jonathan Dylan Barker. He's an international best-selling American author whose work has been broadly described as suspense thrillers, often incorporating elements of horror, crime, mystery, science fiction, and the supernatural. Now, what's really cool is JD sent me this puppy, the JD Barker and EJ Findorf. We Don't Talk About Emma. It's a great read. I finished it. We'll be surprising JD, not so much a surprise anymore, with a review that's been posted on Amazon. So stay tuned till the end for that. So let's bring him into the studio now. Welcome to the show, JD Barker.
Hey, Tom. How you doing?
Pretty good. I thought I had it all laid down there, man, and then I forgot to turn my lights on.
Well, it's Monday. These things happen.
Yeah. Hey, I was just remarking off screen when we're together about your background. Just tease us. Tell us what's going on in that room there.
You might. I'm thinking my like historical background. You mean where I'm actually?
Yeah,
sitting?
no, the physical.
Yeah. So this is my office here at my house. The bookcase behind me, I always joke around about it, but like I built it during COVID because we bought this big old house. It's about 7,000 some square feet. It was condemned. And it's on an island, and like we knew we wanted it. It was the right location, but like it needed to be completely gutted and put back together again. And we did that during COVID, which was insane because, finding contractors in, normal times is near impossible, but try doing it during a pandemic. But my dad was a contractor. I grew up building stuff. I tried to stay out of their hair, but I built the bookcase behind me. I've got a 2-story bookcase in the other room with one of those ladders on it. It keeps me out of trouble.
Yeah, I love it. Keep you out of trouble. Throughout the show, we're going to ask you to hold up a book here and there. There's something really cool right on the back post there by, tell us about that one, James Patterson. That's your latest, right?
That's our latest book together. Jim and I have written, I think this is number 5. This one's called The Writer. It actually just released today. It's coming out worldwide. It's probably our twistiest story that we've done to date. We had a ball writing it, and the reviews on it have been phenomenal. It's hovering just a little shy of 5%. It's like 4.87 or something on Goodreads, which is pretty difficult to get to. So I'm thrilled that the audience actually likes this one this much.
Well, I'm thrilled too. And hey, I got the other one, which we'll talk a bit about, but definitely got to get that one. Maybe even talk your people into signing one for me. But let's get into Plato's Garden. Are you ready to go into Plato's Garden?
Do I need coffee? Am I okay without coffee?
You need cake. You got to have coffee and cake. You can create a virtual. So just stand by and watch this, and we'll get into Plato's Garden. All right, welcome to Plato's Garden. We're here with JD Barker in Plato's Garden. Hey, JD, I'm going to set this up because the audience watching see on the screen something. For those on the podcast, I'll narrate it. So I'm sure you know this, but Plato's Garden, Plato was an Athenian philosopher during the classical period in ancient Greece, founder of the Platonist school of thought and the academy, from the Greek word academia. And the first institution of higher learning in the Western world, it was apparently. And so let's talk about this, 3 things. These are called influences of context, JD. You and I were talking off screen a little bit about getting into stuff about your personal life and your books. We're going to go into 3 areas. First is macro, no order of importance, but macro is really what was happening in the world around JD that influences public works. And, we sometimes will go right back to the early years of childhood. 2 is mezzo, what was happening in your industry or sector. In this case, I would say it's, being an author, it could be media, but what was going on there that influenced your work? And then my favorite micro, JD, what was happening in your personal life that may have influenced your public works? So I'm going to take that off the screen here. And I'm just going to start riffing with you with a couple things. We'll tell stories back and forth. When we were talking just before we went on camera, I was asking you about where you're born, and you told me a little bit about that, and your family, etc. So I'm going to start off in the micro. We'll call this the spark. So JD, your life took a pivotal turn when you embraced autism as your strength. So take us back to that realization. How did it shape your journey? Particularly because you've written all these books and, man, you've transformed your life from being in the corporate sector.
Yeah, so I was born in the 70s. I was born in 71. So back then they didn't look for autism at all. It was just, something you just kind of dealt with. I was the weird kid in the corner, and you just kind of get through life that way. Kids don't want to play with you because you're a little different. Teachers don't know quite what to do with you. I learned very easily. I was reading by the time I was 3. By the time I got into kindergarten, I had read all the Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew mysteries and moved on to things like Charles Dickens and, some of the classics. So I had no trouble with, from that standpoint, but just interacting with other people, socializing, like I didn't get it then. I didn't get it as a teenager, didn't get it as an adult. But, I basically did what my parents told me to do. I finished up school. I went to college, got multiple degrees, and ended up working in the corporate world. At 22, I was working for a brokerage firm. I was a chief compliance officer. And I was very good at my job. I was essentially in charge of monitoring every transaction that passed through the firm, making sure nobody violated any rules or regulations. So it was working with data, and as an autistic person, that's something I was very, very good at. Where problems arose is when I actually found something and I had to leave my office and actually go talk to another human being about it. And in many cases that, it's a confrontational situation to begin with, because somebody did something wrong. I'm going to them to basically explain to them what they did wrong, try to figure out what has to happen to undo whatever they did wrong. But all of that is very confrontational. So, that made it even that much more difficult. And my boss at one point, he pulled me aside. He said, listen, you are very good at the job, but you need some work on the people side. He thought I had anger management issues. So he sent me to an anger management therapist. We got about 20 minutes into our first session and she stopped and she's like, have you ever been tested for autism? And
wow.
I said, no, I didn't even really know what that was. And she said, well, the whole time we've been talking, you haven't made eye contact. You've been rubbing your thumb and your forefinger together. You basically do that whenever you're thinking or you're formulating what you're going to say. She started pointing out all these little, things that I do. And ultimately that's when I was diagnosed. And it was like somebody turning on the lights for me because all of a sudden, I had a problem. Autistic people love to solve a problem. But it was something that I could research, something that I could tackle. And with her help, I was able to do that in a lot of ways. So it changed my life.
Well, thanks for sharing that. My goodness. I mean, I'm learning more and more about autism through you. And I have many friends, I do, and I've met many people through my podcast that have some form of autism or they know someone. It's become you and I talked off screen that for some reason there's more people with autism in this world than there was in the past. Just looking at my notes here, you're in Newcastle, right? And I think you moved there in 2019. And the autism diagnosis, he said 2022. Does dealing with life, things like moving homes, lots of things shifting and changing, stress, when you have autism, does that make it easier for you? Is there a strength you have? Or does that make it more challenging dealing with life events?
No, I mean, I was diagnosed at 22, not in 2022. So it was a long time ago. It was back in the 90s. I mean, for the most part, I basically have learned to double down on the things that are good about it, and I've worked at trying to correct the things that were problematic.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff that it allows me to do is I'm extremely organized. I've got an incredible memory. So things like a move that doesn't bother me at all. I mean, once I'm ready for it.
Yeah.
The move itself was tricky. I mean, I had mentioned I was in the corporate world, so my parents had encouraged writing as a hobby, but they told me you have to get a real job. That's how I ended up, behind a desk.
Yeah.
But I hated it. I would come home at night and I would write, to kind of keep my head on straight. And I did that for 20 some years. I had a side hustle at night as a book doctor and a ghostwriter,
Wow.
basically helping other people get their books published. So I would take a manuscript that was, 90% done. I would help them tweak it, weed out the problems, get it ready for publication, and help them get it out the door. And just over that time frame, I had 6 different books that hit the New York Times bestseller list that I had written, but all came out with other people's names on the cover. So that was essentially the catalyst for me wanting to get out there on my own as an author.
That's amazing.
When that 6-1 hit up, my wife pulled me aside. She said, "Listen, I know you want to become a full-time author. Let's figure out a way to make that happen." At the time, because we had the corporate job, we had the trappings of that. We had a big house, we had cars, we had a boat.
Sure.
We were kind of stuck in that lifestyle, so we couldn't just walk away. So she came up with this crazy plan to sell everything that we owned, which we did. We bought a duplex in Pittsburgh, moved into one side and rented out the other side. And that's basically when I started writing my own books. We looked at the savings account one day and she said, "You've got about 18 months to make this work before you have to get another job. Go." And that's essentially, that's where it took off. So when the book started to sell, we were actually living in that little duplex in Pittsburgh. We realized we don't have to live in Pittsburgh anymore, and just started looking around the country. We happened to find this little island off the coast of Portsmouth in New England called Newcastle, and we fell in love and knew that's where we wanted to end up.
That's amazing. Your wife's, what was her name? She sounds like a very special person.
Yeah, her name is Dana.
Yeah, Dana, I know you told us you have a daughter, Ember. How these names are fascinating to me. But we want to honor you, Dana. It's interesting, JD, just trading stories here, because when you talk, it evokes in my brain something familiar. And after some 30 years in the corporate sector myself, I decided, I put it this way, to burn my boat. There's a series of things going on in her life between my wife and I, and we've been married coming up 30 years. She's born and raised just outside of Rome. And we both came to Canada when we were kids. But I went to her and I said, you know what, I'd like to branch out. I'm good at talking to people. I have all this wisdom and knowledge. I want to start my own platform. And it was scary, man. So we went through the same curve you did. The money was there. We had the great lifestyle. But the one thing I realized is it takes a lot of courage, and I will say standing on the shoulders of others who are great. And that's the role my wife played in my evolution. So thanks for sharing that. I want to put something on screen for a minute here and just have a little fun looking at that. So tell me if you see that. Do you see sort of like an image there with some text?
I do.
Okay. I'm only putting this up because I was curious, because I do a lot of research. When you have autism, the strengths that you might have, especially as an author, I thought this might be evocative for you. Look what I use an AI tool, what they said. I'll just read a few things and get your comment. Authors with autism bring unique strengths to their writing that can create power in distinctive literary works. Some of the benefits: detailed observation and precision, unique perspective, pattern recognition. If you look at that one, the ability to recognize patterns can enhance plot construction, theme development, special knowledge, direct communication style. This one I found interesting. Many autistic writers excel at clear, straightforward prose that avoid unnecessary ambiguity when clarity is needed. Goes on and on and on. The 7 there, emotional honesty. Contrary to stereotypes, many autistic individuals experience intense emotion, convey these powerfully in their writing. Systematic thinking. So let's just get back and take that off the screen. Any quick comments? I mean, it really honors some of the strengths that I think you might have.
Yeah, it's funny because first of all, I use Claude too. Like out of all the AIs, Claude seems to be the the best
Yeah.
when it comes to this sort
Oh,
of thing.
good. Yeah.
But like everything that it listed there are basically things that I stumbled into after that diagnosis. Like
Wow.
I knew I was good with patterns. Like you can't really see my desk behind me, but I'm working on 8 different books right now, and there's not a scrap of paper on my desk. Like
Yeah.
it's all up here.
Wow.
So like I've read so much, as a kid that like the strength, for the framework of a story, that skeleton is just ingrained in my head. So when I'm plotting out a story, I just intrinsically know a twist needs to happen here. This needs to start here. This needs to happen here. And if I go a little bit past that, to me, it feels like I went too far. It's almost like you took a wrong turn or you missed a turn.
Yeah.
I got to throw the car in reverse and I've got to head back. So like that pattern recognition, I think, is important. The character development, I think all that stuff is spot on. One of the things, if you know anybody that's autistic in your life, we mimic a lot of other people in certain situations. So
Sure.
if I'm at a party, I'm standing with 3 or 4 other people and somebody cracks a joke, I'm going to laugh because everybody else is laughing. So I'm a millisecond behind everybody, but I'm basically imitating what I see happen there. I mimic them. One of the things that I learned years ago that I could do is I could mimic authors' voices on paper. So when I was working as a ghostwriter and a book doctor, I wrote a lot of memoirs. So I would interview a famous celebrity or a politician. Then I would have to write a book in first person, basically in their voice. And I was able to do that. I could switch that voice in my head and literally become that person on paper. So
Oh, wow.
from a character development standpoint, like every one of the characters in my stories, they're real people to me. They all have their own unique voices, their own unique thoughts.
Yeah.
And I'm able to communicate all those things as them. Like, I don't think I'd be able to do that, not at the level that I do if I wasn't autistic.
That's incredible. Wow, man. The things you're saying to me, I know the audience, our minds are being blown here. I think earlier you said something like you're working on X number of different books at the same time. And then I'm trying to keep up with you. Like you're just incredible on camera, but you're like a machine. Like there's just so much knowledge coming out of you. I think that's pretty insightful. But the part you just said that really stopped me was like, wow, how you can read something and then become that voice. I think you said it in a different way. That's
To give you an example, like I wrote a prequel to Dracula for Bram Stoker's family. And I had access to all of Bram Stoker's notes and journals and diaries.
Yeah.
So I was able to read, not only everything that he's published, but everything he put down on paper. So when I sat down to write that book, we basically, I was able to do it in Bram's voice, to the point where it's
Wow.
indistinguishable. We lifted some parts directly from his journal, and you can't distinguish those parts from the parts that I actually wrote. It's a unique skill set. I'm very lucky to have it.
Yeah, I've got some information here. Just I'm going to put another view on the screen here. Everybody, I have a action cam, so you see I've got some other literature. I'm just reading it. We're going to read this out. Barker, let's see here. Where is it? His narratives are marked by intricate plots, psychological depth, and unexpected twists that challenge readers' perceptions. In the 4MK thriller series, for instance, Barker delves into the psyche of both the detective and the serial killer, offering a nuanced portrayal of their cat and mouse dynamics. But here's the Dracula thing. Similarly, in Dracul, I think I said that right, co-authored with Dacre Stoker.
Dacre Stoker.
Dacre Stoker. He revisits classic horror themes, infusing them with fresh perspectives and suspense. And then I'll just tease them about another Patterson. Barker's collaboration with James Patterson on the titles like The Coast to Coast Murders further showcases his ability to craft compelling thrillers and keep readers on the edge of your seats. Man, how do you form your thoughts? Where do you get these ideas from when you write?
Oh man, people ask me that all the time. It's they always come out of left field. It's usually when you don't expect it.
Yeah.
I'll give you an example. I had a book about 1.5 years ago called Behind a Closed Door, that came out. I've got a note document on my phone, just literally called Ideas, where I just drop different things in there. I had a husband and wife that I knew I wanted to write about. Their names were Brendan and Abby Hollander. They'd been married for about 10 years, both working full-time jobs, kind of living separate lives, not intentionally. It's just, they get up in the morning, they, hit the car, they leave for work, they get home at night, they're tired, they watch a couple hours of Netflix, fall asleep, and kind of rinse and repeat. It's a story very familiar to a lot of people.
Yeah.
And I knew at the beginning of their story, I wanted there to be an infidelity. So Brandon comes very close to cheating. He doesn't actually do it, but it's a wake-up call for the two of them. So I knew I wanted to start a story with the two of these people in a therapist office because of this particular issue. I had that idea sitting in that document for probably about 2 or 3 years. Nothing happened with it. And then one night, my wife and I, we were talking over dinner. She does a lot of real estate transactions, and she had just bought a house in Georgia, and it was a pretty large house. It had 7 bathrooms in it. And we were just, casually talking about this renovation she had to do. And I brought up this company called Bath Fitters. We've all seen the commercials. They come in one day and they do like a retrofit on your bathroom and make it look new again. We just talked about it like verbally. We didn't look it up on our phones. We didn't type it into anything. But that night we both noticed on our phones and on television, we started seeing ads for bath fitters. And I started researching this a little bit and realized in the terms of service for our phones, we basically give the providers permission to listen to us 24/7. So they grab these particular keywords right out of the air and then use that to target market against us. So that became another what if scenario. Like what happens, think of all this data that's being collected literally on everybody who's got a phone. My phone is sitting next to me. It's listening right now. Who has that data? What are they doing with it? What happens if it falls into the wrong hands? So then I, took that and combined it with my 2 characters, Brendan and Abby. So while they're in their therapist's office at the end of the session, the therapist recommends that they download an app called Sugar and Spice, which is essentially Truth or Dare for adults. And it's meant to help rekindle their marriage. So they download this app onto their phones. But the data stuff that we just talked about is really the heart of the story. So by putting this app on their telephones, they're opening the door to the people who actually collect this data. So 2 halves of a story basically came together. It's like chocolate and peanut butter. And then all of a sudden you've got the full tale.
Man, thank you for sharing that. I can see how your mind's starting to see how your mind works. Even that last piece you said, it's like chocolate and peanut butter. You're very talented and good at drawing pictures in my mind. So that's amazing. I'm a visual learner, but that stuff, especially reading one of the books I read, that stuff's all over your work. Before we go on out of micro, one last question, just about your childhood, your parents, who I like to ask, because my dad's passed, my mom's still here, but who shaped you the most? Our parents aren't perfect. Sometimes they have flaws. Sometimes they have strengths. Who shaped you? And tell us a bit about your mom and dad, if you can.
They both shaped me. They were together for, they got divorced probably around when I was 15 or 16, but for the most of my, childhood, they were together. My dad just instilled a really strong work, intensity in me. He was an old school European that came here during the war. He was a contractor. He used to drag me to construction sites from the time I was like 5 or 6 years old. So when I, decided that I wanted a moped at 14, I was basically told, well, you have to get a job. So I've been working ever since then. But like that, that work, it's instilled in me. I think that came from him, like that drive. My mom has always been creative. When I was a kid, I used to write, little stories. My sister is 15 months younger than me. So I created like a library in my room. She would check them out. I would charge her late fees. It was this whole thing. But my mom would encourage that. But, like I mentioned earlier, like she always added the caveat, writing is a fantastic talent. It's a good hobby, but you can't make a living at it. You have to get a real job. So in a roundabout way, they both sort of shaped what I'm doing. Neither of them probably would have approved of me becoming a full-time author.
Yeah.
Even today, I've got a book that released. I had a copy sent to my mom. Like she still doesn't believe that you can make a living as an author, even, all these years later.
Yeah. She sounds like a wonderful mom. Just riffing on that from what you've said brought out of me. So similar, my dad was born in the Fiji Islands. My paternal great grandfather was from India, and my dad worked hard. When we came to Canada, he pumped gas. He just had to start there. And then he moved up, became an educator. My dad always said to me, JD, never put your hand out and ask, work hard, be the biggest person in the room, stand out for something, stand up for your greatness. But what's your only, my dad used to say. In other words, if you're in a group of 10 people and you want to get noticed at work, what's the one thing you only do well? And I starting to see in you just the way you put your thoughts together and your creativity. That's, to me, one of your onlys. But my dad had me working from a young age as well. I think age 12, I had a paper route and was always trying to make my ends meet. And I think those things really shape us, particularly, raising my daughter. Some of the things I see in her now, I can attribute back to my father. So thanks for sharing that with us. I'm going to go into the mezzo piece here. Everybody, we're still in Plato's Garden here with the great J.D. Barker. J.D., we're going to get you to hold up your book in just a minute too, so stand by for that. So I'll call this is sort of the sector, what influenced your work, sector of where you're actually working. So I guess being a writer. So I call it the journey from Forsaken to We Don't Talk About Emma, which is a book that you sent me. Your stories captivate readers. So give us a thread on how your personal journey influenced some of your writing styles and themes. I know about other things around you externally, but you personally, is there something you can cite from some of your work that was influenced by you?
I don't know because I literally get paid to make shit up. So like
I like your honesty, by the way.
Yeah. I don't really pull from my real life a whole lot
Really?
when it comes to that.
Yeah.
I think mainly because, I spent, I was 43 when I published that first book.
Yeah.
I spent the bulk of my adult life, living in the world that people wanted us to live in.
Yeah.
And I didn't enjoy it that much, so now that I'm doing what I actually like, I purposely write stories because I want to, I'm telling myself a story that doesn't exist. I'm taking myself to a place that doesn't exist, people that don't exist, to, in a lot of ways to fill a void.
Yeah. That's
so
awesome.
It's an escapism for me. So like, that's, I think that's the basis of it.
Well, I like that. So what came to mind when you're talking is living vicariously through others. And the thread in my background, I come from a broken home. My dad left when I was 12, but he was an addicted man to alcohol. And I love him dearly. He died in Alcoholics Anonymous, 22 years. But I really didn't know him. I've just read some work by a fellow named Gurdjieff called, In Search of Remarkable Men, if I messed the title up. But it was like I was seeking throughout my life, JD, other people, other things to live vicariously through that versus living through my own painful experiences. So I kind of relate to what you said about writing beyond yourself into the new parts you discover. I'm going to put on the screen here something. Just walk us through what are we looking at here? If you can see that image.
Well, just a bunch of my different books. Behind the Closed Doors, the one we were just talking about.
Yeah.
Forsaken, that's the book that started it all for me. That one I indie published, but it ended up selling quite a bit, which was basically enough to put me on the radar of the traditional publishers. Fourth Monkey, which was the next one that came out.
What's quite a bit? Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but
a little over about 250,000 copies.
Awesome.
Worldwide.
Wow.
So when I finished up The Fourth Monkey, which was my next book, we ended up in a bidding war for that one because I had the sales track record behind me. It's a solid story, kind of everything aligned for that one.
Yeah.
Fifth to Die is the sequel to that one. Sixth Wicked Child is the third one in that particular trilogy.
Yeah, it's amazing. Now there's a little image, if the audience can see it on screen, of a guy that looks like you sitting in front of a Mac. Just play with us for a minute in your mind. When you sit down to write, how do you get in state, or do you just sit, or what happens in that moment? Do you have a ritual? Like I've heard some people say, I don't shave for a week, or I put on my ball cap or whatever.
It's a lot of it is very Pavlov's dog to me.
Yeah.
Like when I was working in the corporate world, I was doing about 60 to 80 hours a week on the regular job, so I had to find time to write. And I learned that if I wore noise canceling headphones and listened to a thunderstorm soundtrack, it basically told my brain now we're writing. So the second I heard that sound, it knew that it was time to write. So I could turn that sound on and I could immediately just start putting words down on paper. Learned a lot of little tricks over the years. But I try to write in the same place every day. We're in my office right now, or I am. I sit at the same desk every day, try to keep it, because when you do that, I think that it forces your brain to just kind of understand this is what we're doing right now. I can write in other places, particularly using that sound that I mentioned. But if you're a new writer, you're trying to get into this, I think it's important to try to do it at the same place every day. If you can do it at the same time every day, try to do little things like that to get your brain, fired up and ready to go.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I had a concussion in 2018. I talk about it a bit in the context of my work, and I had to go through brain recovery to walk straight. My gait was off, my cognitive abilities. I still have a bit of light sensitivity, but that's one of the things that they told me at the brain clinic, JD, was brown noise and white noise. And I actually have on my Spotify app a collection of these tracks. And I find that too. I'm a writer too. I've published 3 books, but not nowhere near what the quality of what you've done. But I started doing that, man, and it's dramatic, the impact. Last night I had one of the best nights sleep. Not that it matters to you, but I listened to meditation before bed, and it's the same thing. And I'll finish with this: that everyone, I'm an advocate for mental wellness, and we put a lot of pressure on our brains, but looking after the health of our brains makes a difference. So what's your care routine for yourself, your self-care? Because you're always seems to be going and writing. What do you do to look after your brain and your health?
Yeah, I mean, I try to balance everything.
Yeah.
So my quitting bell rings at 3 o'clock Eastern, no matter what.
Nice.
One of the things that happened to me when I first started, when the books first started coming out, particularly in other countries, I would get interview requests at crazy hours, 11 o'clock my time, 1 o'clock in the morning, because they're coming in from all over the world. And at the beginning, I took all of them. But it wasn't sustainable. You can't break up your day like that. You can't, your brain, like you mentioned, you literally just start to fall apart. So my quitting bell rings at 3, no matter what. I live on an island, like I mentioned. I go for a little run around the island. I do 1 lap. It's 4.2 miles. And I basically use that time to think about what I'm going to work on the next day, and just kind of relax a little bit. And then when I get home, I spend the rest of the night with my daughter and my wife, and have family time.
I love that. Everybody come back to this teaching moments on the show about what JD Barker does to maintain physical and mental wellness. That daughter you mentioned there, that would be Ember, right? That's your 7-year-old. And that in itself, I know there's just like, how did you come up with that name? But that in itself creates pictures in my mind. It's such a neat name. Again, talking to someone who thinks in detail, some people would say, I went for a run. JD's saying, I went for a run. It's 4.2 kilometers. 4.2 miles, 1 lap. And I'm going like, that's pretty awesome. That's why your books are so detailed.
Well, I use that time to think about what I'm gonna write the next day. So
Sure.
it's funny because if any of those pieces fall apart, then the writing itself suffers. Like I've seen it happen.
Let's stay back in macro here. This is again macro, the sector you're in. We're talking here now about challenges, and maybe other wannabe writers might connect to this thought pattern. But I'll just throw it out there as the challenges. So, what's the hardest truth you faced in your creative journey? How did it transform you? And before you say anything, I've heard people say, I want to write a book, but they stand in their own way, or there's something there. They don't know why they don't. And then writer's block and things where you just like all of a sudden you become this writer, but there's a big challenge. What was yours or any of your biggest ones? How'd you overcome that?
Well, I think with just about anything, I mean, it doesn't have to be even writing a book, but like you need to take a step back and kind of break it down into the sum of its parts. If you tell yourself I'm going to write a book, that's a daunting thing. A book is 400 or 500 pages long, 250 words per page. That's a lot of work. But if you write 200 words a day, that's a full novel within a year. So if you break it down into those small little increments, it gets a little easier. It's sort of like working on a car. Like you don't just go in and just say, I'm going to work on the car. You say, I'm going to take the alternator out and I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Like you work on the individual parts. So I find that pretty much any task, as daunting or scary as it might be, if you take a step back and just look at it, the simplistic type terms, it gets a lot easier. From a writing standpoint, I mean, the hardest thing to do in today's world is just stand out. When I published Forsaken, there were 700,000 books published that year. This was 2014. Last year, there were a little over 2 million books published.
Wow.
Your book is one of them. So you have to figure out what are you going to do to make your book stand out among all those others.
Sure.
Now with AI, who knows what that number is going to be in another year.
That's a fact. That is a fact, and there's a whole debate on that. I'm doing a doctoral degree right now. Hopefully by July, I'll submit my thesis, and it's been intense. But the university is in London, England, JD, and the professors, we just had our cohort every 2 weeks on Zoom, by the way, in that, it's fascinating because I really wish a guy like you was in there because we need a little bit of creativity. But there's people from Hong Kong and the United States and Canada and Africa. But they're talking about at the university putting a policy online now, and they're telling us they don't know how to deal with collaboration of AI. They don't know what to tell the students, but we're all collaborating. They support it. So it's a very interesting topic. Let me get back to the new book. Hey, did you want to hold that up there, the Patterson one that just, I think, published?
Well, that one's mounted to the wall, so I
there it
can't
is.
actually pick that one up. But
Well,
we can
bring it in. Yeah, bring it into focus for us in your mind and tell us about it.
Yeah, it's funny because Jim and I have written a lot of stuff together. We wanted to write just a straight up thriller. When we wrote Coast to Coast Murders, it was a crazy, wild story. It's the first time I've ever gotten, or anybody's ever gotten, James Patterson to pants a novel or to basically go into a project without an outline. But like I wrote a chapter, he would write a chapter. We went just back and forth on it. We had a ball doing that. But then after that, we did a series of more or less horror stories. Whenever he came up with a scary idea, I was the guy he came to. But we just decided, about a year and a half ago, we wanted to write up a straight up thriller, which is what The Writer is about. So it opens with a woman. Her name is Denise Morrow. She's in her apartment in New York. She is found by the police hovering over her husband's dead body. She is covered in blood, holding the murder weapon. And she asks for one particular detective to investigate the case, and she won't talk to anybody else. And this is by far the craziest story the two of us have ever written. And it's funny because like when I wrote the ending, I sent it off to him and he called me up and he's like, this is the first time I have ever been shocked by an ending. Like I literally stumped James Patterson. He didn't see the ending coming. So when you can come up with an ending that even James Patterson doesn't see ahead of time, you know it's pretty good. So we're excited for this one, but it released today worldwide.
Well, first of all, congratulations. Like I said, we'll be getting a copy of that one. I just read something else off my paper here in the studio that I wrote this down in my research. Throughout your body of work, correct me if I'm wrong, throughout his body of work, J.D. Barker consistently explores the darker facets of human nature, often blurring the lines between good and evil. Narratives marked with intricate plots, psychological depth. So that's what I was thinking about when you just said what you did about this book with Patterson. Is there any particular reason why your mind focuses that way? You sort of balance both sides of the equation?
Not really. I mean, I tend to approach everything, like I try to keep my characters as realistic as possible. Like nobody in real life is black or white.
Yeah.
Nobody is good or evil. We're all somewhere in between. We fall into that gray area. So I try to bring that out in the characters. In The Fourth Monkey, half the book is diary entries written by the killer. And by the end of that book, like I think the readers actually feel sorry for the killer. Like they close the cover and they're more or less siding with him. And it's a difficult thing to do, but I want people to see both sides of it. I want them to understand that this guy's done some bad things, but there's reasons for it. And, once you understand those reasons, it may or may not make sense, right? But it becomes, it's one of those things. Like you want people to walk away thinking about it.
Yeah.
I think that's where that all comes from.
Yeah, it's fascinating. How do you deal? I'm a student of neuroscience, again, because of my brain situation I had. I'll just show you something in the background of my studio. You see back there, JD, is looks like a replica of a human brain on my, that's actually a medical grade real size brain. And I was reading up a lot on, because sometimes when I watch TV, for example, I watch movies with my wife, and if they're heavy, right, they're thrillers, what happens is the brain, we were on the edge of our seat, but if there's too much enmity or there's too much difficult topic, sometimes it's hard to continue and sustain watching. But I've seen good authors and screenplay writers, all of a sudden there's some kind of a relief where there's some kind of a quip or not humor, but something that kind of is a feel-good moment where the brain literally takes a breath and says, okay, I'm coming back now for more. Just tell us about through your books, because you've written them as narrative story in my mind. I love them. You can't put them down. But how do you keep the audience engaged? Is there a technique or a concept so you don't really make it too heavy?
Yeah, man, I try to throw in some of those lighter moments, like you mentioned. It's
Yeah,
almost like being on a roller coaster. Like the roller coaster can't just keep going up that hill, and you can't
exactly.
just go down the hill. You've got to do something else in between. I've tried going the other route. Like I wrote a book called A Caller's Game a few years ago, literally we put the pedal to the floor at the beginning of the book, and we don't let up until like the final chapter.
Wow.
And it is an exhausting thing to read. People will pick it up and try to read it at bedtime, and they don't sleep. Because you just keep going and going. Like it amps you up instead of
Yeah.
helping you, wind down.
Yeah.
So you got to be cognizant of that as an author. There's a lot of little tips and tricks that I've learned over the years to pull that kind of thing off. I mean, the simplest thing for me, a lot of times when I go back on a second draft, I strip out like the last sentence of the chapter or the last paragraph of the chapter, which tends to create like a mini cliffhanger. When you write a chapter, your brain, the subconscious, wants to create an ending. We want to have a beginning, middle, and
Yeah.
end to that chapter, which is counterintuitive to what you want to do as a thriller author. You want people to flip that to the next page when they get to the end. So I find that if I take that little bit off the bottom, just that last paragraph, the last sentence or whatever,
Yeah.
it creates that mini cliffhanger, causes them to have to flip that page.
Well, that's fascinating. Makes a lot of sense to me. I'm just holding up here the book you sent me. I was privileged to get an advanced copy. We Don't Talk About Emma. One of the things that I was noticing, especially coming from an executive career like you, is a lot of the books I read, the nonfiction books, were shorter, and I find that a lot of novels, like look at the size of this baby. Is there any reason why fiction tends to be that much longer? Is it because there's just more meat in it? There's more story, or?
No, I mean, the average length for a fiction novel is 80 to 120,000 words, somewhere in that range.
Yeah, I see.
That's where they've always been.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Let's get back into Plato's. Just one more thing I want to throw out at you, and this is about the number of books you've written. So just when I give it back to you, you can just tell us how many books you've written. But I was thinking again about Patterson and some of these folks you've collaborated with. So how did those partnerships influence you, or how did you grow through some of those partnerships working with other writers?
I mean, one of the reasons I take partnerships is to learn from the the person I'm working with.
Yeah.
So when somebody like James Patterson calls you, not only is it thrilling to be able to write with that guy, but I get just as much out of the phone calls that we have on marketing and on the business side as I do on the writing side. Like he's been a mentor, a teacher, and a friend. It's a priceless experience.
Yeah.
And anytime at this point I get a lot of offers to do stuff, and it's really got to be something that's going to add to what I'm already doing. Because it keeps it fun, it keeps it fresh.
How did you meet Patterson?
We sent him a copy of The Fourth Monkey for a blurb. So, if you pick up a book in the grocery store, it's got that one sentence, greatest book ever, James Patterson. So we sent him a copy of The Fourth Monkey, hoping he would give us one of those phrases for the book. He liked it enough to ask me if I wanted to co-author with him.
Congratulations. That's fantastic. See, everybody always talk about that I say that to my daughter. You can't, or it doesn't hurt to ask. It doesn't hurt to ask, even an unintended consequence, like you just told us.
Yeah, I bring that up all the time. Like if, always ask the question. Worst thing is, somebody might say no, you're going to get shot down. You're going to get shot down more than you hear a yes. But if you don't ask the question, that to me, that's way worse.
Thanks for sharing that. I go back to when I published my first book in 2017, and my publishers in New York, and JD, you're an expert on this topic, but I'm talking more in context for the audience. And they said, try to go out and get blurbs, you call it, or early praise. And they asked me to go get like 20, and it's on my website with my book. Man, I was fearless, but I had a lot of fear inside. I wasn't telling people, but I was fearless. So I sent stuff out to people. I thought, there's no way they're going to even take a look at Tom. They don't even know me. So I ended up getting like Mike Eruzione from the Miracle on Ice hockey team did a blurb for my book. I mean, I'm a Canadian. He wouldn't even know me. I got a senator in our Canadian Senate, our government. It's hard to get even in touch with these people. So I just kept plugging away. And the collection now I have of opportunities that came through just being proud of my work and believing in myself, which has taken a lifetime to get there, has really been rewarding. And you're teaching us a lot today about that through sharing your partnerships. Seeing that you said about marketing and the things you're learning from the guys, give us a nugget for the authors out there. Like what once you get a book done, in terms of monetization, where you're earning your income, is there any like one or two of your favorite strategies for marketing the book?
It honestly, it changes all the time.
Does it?
Yeah, I mean, there's certain things you do for every book that everybody does. You know, you run Facebook ads, you run Amazon ads, you know, sometimes some print, you know, podcasts, all these different things. Whenever I've got a book coming out, I make a list of everything that I see everybody else doing to promote their titles. Once I've got that list together, I try to create another list of things nobody is doing, and try to come up with something outside the box. I'll give you an example. So I've got a book coming out in May, and this time I can hold up a book if I can find my camera.
Yeah, full screen.
There we go. It's called Something I Keep Upstairs. It's a haunted house story, but the house in the story is actually real. Like I mentioned, I go for a run every day. When I cross the beach on our island, if I look out over the water, about a quarter mile out is a tiny little island. It's only about an acre with a single house on it. And that's the basis of my story. It's a haunted house. Everybody around here knows all the stories about it, but it's the basis of my story. So with the book coming out, you know, I took a step back. You know, what can I do that, you know, nobody else is doing? So I crafted a contest. We're going to take one name. We're going to draw one winner 1 month after publication, and allow one reader to actually stay overnight in the haunted house with 3 of their friends. So, and it's not an easy house to get to. You can only get to it by boat, you know. So this winner and their 3 friends, they're going to come to a dock. We're going to pick them up in a boat. We're going to drop them off at the house, and nobody's coming back for them for 24 hours. They're going to be left stranded in a haunted house. You know, so when you come up with an idea like that, what ends up happening from the marketing standpoint is people talk about it. You know, they can't help it. You know, people, if you go on social media, on Facebook, you know, people are saying, I'll do it. Will you do it?
Totally.
I won't do it. I'll do it if you do it. But the point is, you know, like, because that word of mouth is happening, like that is what sells books. Like you can buy as many ads, you know, as much advertisement, TV spots, whatever you want to do. But if you don't get word of mouth, your book isn't going to sell as well as it needs to. So I always try to come up with some creative idea like that, something out of the box that's going to get people talking.
Oh, I'm just salivating now, man. I want to be the winner of that. What an awesome idea. That is so creative. By the way, which side of your family did you get your hair genes from? You've got this great long head of hair.
That's probably my mom. My dad always had his short, so I don't know what his hair situation was really like.
I'm sure you're very humble, man. I'm sure you've been told. When I first saw that picture I used for the thumbnail for the show today, you know, the word rock star came to mind. You have that hair and that clean look, and you're in good shape. It appears. I know how old you are from what you told me, and you know you look great on camera, man. As we're getting to the end, we got about 7 or 8 minutes here. I'm going to honor you with a couple things. I was just looking at my last segment I do. It's something new. It's kind of a futurist thing. So I'm just going to have fun with you and throw this out. I call it the book unwritten. Go figure, right? Talking to a guy like you, you've probably got like 9 of them already in mind. So this is the question to you. If you could write one book that doesn't yet exist, and you've been thinking about it for a while, what would it be and why?
Ooh, I don't even know where to start with that one, because you're right. Because when I get to that point, I'll write the book.
Yeah.
There's at this point, I've got more books that I want to write than there is time to write them. So yeah, I wouldn't even know where to start.
Grab one idea that's already in the pipeline, something you're working on, or just anything at all.
I mean, right now, do you remember a movie from the 90s called Flatliners?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so it was a crazy movie. It came out in 1990. It had Kiefer Sutherland, Julia Roberts, Kevin Bacon, Billy Baldwin, and Oliver Platt. So all these big names before anybody really knew who they were.
Yeah.
It's about medical students who kill each other to try and figure out if there's life after death. So they kill each other, then they bring each other back again. It's always been one of my favorite movies. And the guy who wrote it, his name's Peter Filardi. He's on one of my other film projects for Dracul. And long story short, we ended up talking and we came up with an idea to reboot the franchise. So I'm actually writing the book right now. I'm writing the book as a novel. And then the novel is going to come out first, followed by the movie. So we're rebooting the film franchise based on a book that I'm working on now.
That's very cool. Well, you heard it here, everybody, an idea that's been percolating. I remember that from my high school days, that movie. It's funny how we don't forget those things. I'm a big fan of the hero's journey narrative, as you know, from the show, and putting people into the journey of the story. It's like you're in and you just can't put it down. I think you write really well that way. The book Unwritten, we're going to just put that aside And how many books have you written altogether? Just roughly, do you take it down?
You mentioned that, and like I was trying to do a mental tally in my head, and I think without Wikipedia, I don't know if I could even figure it out right now. I think there's 12 that are actually published,
Yeah.
and there's about 8 or 9 that are in various stages of working towards publication.
Yeah,
So yeah, somewhere in that range, between 12 and 20 or so.
it's incredible. And what is a novella? I just heard this term not long ago versus a novel. Is it just the size of it?
Yeah, it's just the length. The novella is typically around 40,000 words, and novels are around 80,000 or more.
Okay, awesome. Everybody, we're here with J.D. Barker, and multiple best-selling author. I'm going to honor you now with a review for the book that I held up before, and you did send me. We Don't Talk About Emma. Say something about the book that you want to tell the audience before I put the review up. Anything at all. Its origin, why.
Yeah, I mean, I working with Patterson, one of the things that he taught me is just the importance of having co-authors. And like when you have 2 people in the room, basically you can create a story that's unique that neither of you could come up with on your own. So with We Don't Talk About Emma, the guy that I wrote it with, E.J. Feindorf, he lived in New Orleans. He knows that city inside and out. He knows the streets. He knows the people. So he was able to bring an authenticity to the story that I just couldn't do. Like I could fake my way through it. I could do enough Google searches to kind of get it done. But having that authentic voice in the story is priceless. If you like New Orleans in any way, you will love this book.
Oh, I loved it. So I'm going to put on screen the review. I put it down on the table. My wife read it too, so I'm going to encourage her to write review. Everybody, before I put this up, I just want to say that reviews matter, right, JD? That's how our
absolutely.
Yeah. And, everyone, I want you to get the latest book that he's going to tell us about at the end again. Go read it and then post a review on Amazon, goodreads.com. These are really important. So let me just make sure I put the right one up. Here we go. I'm going to read it out loud to you if that's okay.
Sure.
It's been just posted on Amazon.ca, so international review. 5-star, a thrilling descent into justice and secrets. Barker at his best. That's the title. Here we go. J.D. Barker and E.J. Feindorf deliver an electrifying ride in We Don't Talk About Emma, a novel that grips you from the very first page and refuses to let go. Set in the atmospheric French Quarter of New Orleans, this psychological thriller weaves a masterful tale of justice, vengeance, and the hidden truth that lurk beneath the surface. Detective Nikki Mayo is a protagonist you won't forget, driven, flawed, relentless in her pursuit of justice. And when the system fails and Predator walks free, her moral struggle leads to a shocking discovery. Someone has already taken justice into their own hands. The hunt for Emma, the missing teenage girl at the heart of the mystery, takes readers through a labyrinth of secrets and deception where every shadow hides a potential truth or another lie. Barker's signature style, razor-sharp suspense, deeply layered characters, jaw-dropping twists is on full display here. The pacing is relentless, the stakes impossibly high. And just when you thought you have it figured out, Barker reminds us why he's a master of the genre, the ending. Absolutely haunting. If you love thrillers that push boundaries and keep you breathless until the final page, We Don't Talk About Emma is a must-read. I highly recommend it. Congratulations.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that. That's awesome.
You're welcome. Trademark of my show, you can see my stacks of books in the background. If I just put my, that's just part of them. I will not do a show with an author unless I read the book cover to cover. That's my level of commitment to you. So thank you for that. And now we're going to wrap by honoring you with an award. Did you know you were getting an award today?
I did not. I wasn't ready for an award.
All right. Well, here we go. Let me just put that camera up there. All right. Have you heard, what challenge coins are?
Yeah.
Okay. So it comes with a little sleeve. It's actually hand-painted, crafted, and made in the United States. The history of the challenge coin, JD, for the audience sake too, is they surfaced during World War I era. The practice of carrying a coin designed specifically for a unit, popular with Army Special Forces. So carrying the coin at all times, presenting it when challenged, prove affiliation, became a lot of commitment. And they had some fun with it, JD. If you didn't have your coin, you might buy drinks. That still goes on today. And around the world, people collect them, but there's coins. When I started the show, we're approaching 300 now, 1-hour interviews. I remember saying, I don't know how this is going to go, but I want the 1% of people in the world that have taken something and turned it into a purpose to change, impact lives, to come through the show. And so you're being inducted into the Quiet Warrior community. This is the front of it. You can see hand painted, crafted, the show logo. But in the back is very intricate, unbiased, how beautiful is the hero's journey narrative, Joe Campbell. Wow. And so congratulations. Welcome to the Quiet Warrior community.
Thanks, man.
You're welcome. We'll get from you offline here. Let me just take that camera off screen there. We'll get offline a mailing address. And if you get it, I'd love for you to take a photo with it somewhere meaningful where when we look at it, we go, that's who he is. That's what he does. So on that note, I'm going to give it to you for, how about this? Is there anything you're thinking you haven't said to the audience today? Anything at all that you want to say to them as you leave? And then where can people get a hold of you and all these wonderful books?
Well, we got The Writer, which just came out today, so you can pick that one up in any bookstore. And then coming out in May, we've got Something I Keep Upstairs, which is probably the scariest book I think I've written to date. It took me a while to get that one done. I kind of had to keep putting it aside and coming back to it because I honestly, I scared the crap out of myself. And I just like, yeah. But that one is a fun read. The author's note at the end is probably my favorite part because I tell you how much of it is actually true, and that's the part that's really going to shock you. Wow. You can find all my books at jdbarker.com or in any bookstore.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, JD, it's great to have you here. We'll have you back again. And I got to get me a copy of Patterson, the new book you wrote with Patterson. So fantastic. Thanks for entertaining us, educating us, and teaching us today so many great things. It's just been an honor. We'll see you back again.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome, man. Hey, everybody, find that passion inside yourself like you've just heard and seen from JD Barker. And find the life that you want to live, but live the life that, let's try that again, 3, 2, 1. Find the life that you want to live, but live that life that you deserve and desire. We'll see you all in the Quiet Warrior Show. Again, we got a lot going on. Thanks again, JD.
Take care. Thank you for listening to the Quiet Warrior Show. Create is a motive-based leadership development firm. www.kreat.ca.
Okay, we're just going to take her offline here. We're still live, so let me do that, and then we'll just